Something feels different when you drive through Louisiana. Not in a headline way, more like a change in temperature you notice before you can explain it. You pass porches that used to hold chairs and conversations, and they're empty. You see windows that should glow at dinner time, and they're dark. Lawns that were once trimmed for pride are starting to look tired, the grass a little too high, the edges a little too soft, like nobody's been checking on the place. And the for sale signs are everywhere. But what's strange is what's missing: urgency. The signs don't look new. They look sun-faded, as if they've been standing there long enough to blend into the street. In a state that knows how to hold on to culture, music on nights, food that feels like family, neighborhoods that remember names, this stillness lands differently. Louisiana is supposed to feel alive. So when it goes quiet, it's not just real estate, it's a signal. Here's the hard truth. This isn't a dramatic crash with sirens and chaos. It's absence. Demand didn't leave loudly. It simply stopped showing up. Listings linger. Rentals sit vacant. Sellers wait, and the waiting becomes normal. The danger is that quiet feels temporary, like it will fix itself, until you realize the market has already moved on without you. Before we go further, subscribe and hit the bell. These shifts don't trend until it's too late. In this video, we're walking through 10 Louisiana cities where homes are sitting empty right now in 2025, not as rumors, but as behavior. And I'll warn you, 2 cities on this list will shock anyone still clinging to the idea that Southern housing is always affordable and always safe. Once you learn to read silence, you stop chasing stories and start protecting your decisions. Price drops get attention, but empty homes tell the real story. A price can fall for dozens of reasons: seasonality, negotiation, even strategy. But when homes sit empty, that's different. That's not a number changing on a screen. That's people choosing not to show up. And in markets like Louisiana right now, that choice is becoming the loudest signal there is. An empty home means no buyer urgency and no renter fallback. It means listings expire instead of selling. Rentals sit vacant instead of cash flowing. Incentives get offered and ignored. Sellers repaint, reprice, relist, and still wait. The market isn't arguing about value anymore. It's disengaging. And disengagement is far more dangerous than a headline price cut. What's driving that disengagement is simple math. Population growth in many Louisiana cities has stalled or reversed. Jobs have shifted out or failed to keep pace with costs. Insurance premiums, especially in flood and hurricane-exposed areas, have exploded, turning what looked affordable on paper into something heavy month after month. Property taxes, utilities, and maintenance stack on top of that, and suddenly the monthly reality looks nothing like the listing price buyers remember. Investors notice this first. When insurance eats returns and vacancies stretch longer, the numbers stop working. Short-term rentals that once felt like safety nets no longer cover carrying costs. Long-term renters are harder to qualify and slower to commit. So investors pull back quietly, not in panic, but in spreadsheets. When that capital steps away, it removes demand most owner-occupants never see coming. This is where the gap opens between seller memory and buyer math. Sellers remember 2021 and 2022. They remember fast offers, multiple showings, and confidence that someone will buy it. Buyers in 2025 are running very different calculations. They're asking how long they'll be stuck if they need to sell. They're asking what happens if insurance jumps again. They're asking whether jobs are actually moving in or quietly moving out. So when we say homes are sitting empty, we don't mean abandoned in a dramatic way. We mean unused, unchosen, ignored. That's the quiet risk Louisiana faces right now. Not hype, not fear, just numbers that no longer support participation. If this already sounds familiar, make sure you're subscribed. This pattern repeats. When people hear a countdown like this, they assume it's about popularity or prices. It isn't. This list isn't ranking the most beautiful cities or the ones that feel most familiar. It's ranking absence. Not what's happening, but what's no longer happening. Buyers not touring, renters not applying, offers not arriving. That absence is measurable, and that's what this countdown is built on. The framework is something I call signal stacking. No single metric tells the truth on its own. Prices can drop while demand stays healthy. Inventory can rise while transactions continue. But when multiple signals appear together, the story becomes unavoidable. We're looking at vacancy rates climbing, days on market stretching, listings expiring and relisting, price cuts that fail to restart interest, rental demand weakening, and insurance costs creating friction buyers can't ignore. Louisiana's cities fall into a few clear behavioral categories once you look this way. Some are coastal risk cities, where insurance premiums and flood exposure quietly choke demand even when prices look reasonable. Others are industrial legacy cities, places built around industries that no longer grow the way they once did, leaving housing supply searching for a population that isn't expanding. Then there are investor-dependent rental markets, areas where demand was propped up by landlords and short-term rentals rather than owner-occupants. When that investor layer pulls back, emptiness shows up fast. Finally, there are spillover suburbs, towns that benefited from nearby growth but are now losing momentum as affordability math changes. Each city on this list shows multiple signals at once. Not one red flag, but several, stacking together. That's why the ranking matters. A city with one issue can recover. A city with 5 unresolved pressures usually doesn't rebound quietly. As we move down the list, the signals intensify. The final 2 cities show nearly every warning sign at the same time, including sellers still pricing homes as if demand never left. That denial is part of the story. Stay with me. The last cities change how you see this entire state, and they force hard questions buyers can no longer avoid now. At the bottom of this list, where the shift is still easy to ignore, the story isn't collapse, it's hesitation. These are the cities where homes are beginning to sit, but not long enough yet to trigger panic. At number 10 is Lake Charles. For years, it represented resilience. Energy jobs, rebuilding cycles, and steady demand created the sense that housing here would always recover. Today, listings feel different. Homes aren't selling quickly, rentals sit between tenants longer, and insurance costs quietly eat into affordability. Demand hasn't vanished, but buyers are slower, more selective, and less forgiving. The takeaway here is simple. Leverage still exists, but only for those who move with discipline, not optimism. At number 9 is Alexandria. This was once the definition of stable, affordable Louisiana living. Families moved here for predictability, not growth. Now listings linger just long enough to feel uncomfortable. Price reductions appear, then stall. Buyers tour homes, but fewer commit, because job growth hasn't kept pace with ownership costs. The city didn't lose its appeal, it lost urgency. The lesson is subtle but important. When stability stops attracting new demand, prices don't crash, they soften quietly, and buyers who wait too long often miss the best negotiating window. Number 8 is Monroe. This market leaned heavily on industrial legacy and regional employment. It once represented reliability for investors and owner-occupants alike. Today, rentals struggle to stay filled, and owner-buyers hesitate as wages lag behind rising costs. Listings recycle with minor price cuts that don't spark action. What buyers should notice here is time. When time on market stretches without headlines, it signals a market losing momentum before sellers fully accept it. That's where thoughtful buyers gain leverage. At number 7 is Huma. This city thrived on energy-adjacent income and investor confidence. It used to represent opportunity tied to industry strength. Now emptiness creeps in quietly. Homes don't disappear from listings, they linger. Investors pull back first, leaving owner-occupants to absorb inventory they can't quite afford. Sellers still price for yesterday, while buyers calculate tomorrow. The signal here is denial. When sellers wait for demand to return instead of adjusting, buyers who understand the shift can negotiate from a position of patience, not pressure. What ties these 4 cities together isn't fear, it's friction. Transactions slow, not because people hate these places, but because the math stopped working as cleanly as it once did. This is the phase where regret is still optional. Buyers aren't competing yet, sellers aren't desperate yet, but the window is narrow. Those who read the signals early don't rush and they don't freeze. They move deliberately. If this is helping you think clearly, subscribe. It sharpens from here. By the time we reach this part of the list, the tone changes. These aren't cities where sellers are hoping the market slows. These are cities where price cuts are expected, not shocking. At number 6 is Shreveport. This market once relied on steady employment, regional healthcare, and affordable housing to keep demand stable. Today, listings linger long enough to force conversations sellers didn't want to have. Homes relist after failed contracts. Negotiations stretch for weeks instead of days. Rentals that once stayed full now sit between tenants, sometimes for months. Investors have quietly reduced exposure here, not because Shreveport lost its identity, but because affordability math stopped working. The warning label is clear. Pricing must reset to local income reality before buyers feel safe re-engaging. At number 5 is Lafayette. For years, this city represented cultural energy and economic resilience tied to oil, gas, and regional business growth. That story hasn't disappeared, but the timing no longer works. Listings feel heavy now. Sellers offer concessions, closing credits, even rate buydowns, and still buyers hesitate. You see longer inspection periods, more walkaways, more "let's wait and see." Rentals are softer too, especially where investors overestimated demand. The cognitive dissonance here is strong. It's still a good city, but it's bad timing. Buyers are no longer chasing deals. They're watching price history. The warning label here is job stability, visibility. Until buyers believe income growth can support ownership costs, demand stays parked. At number 4 is Baton Rouge. This one surprises people. As a state capital with universities and healthcare anchors, Baton Rouge was supposed to be insulated. Instead, it's firmly in the resistance zone. Listings don't vanish anymore. They age. Price cuts stack instead of clear inventory. Investors who entered for rentals are exiting quietly as vacancies stretch and insurance costs bite harder. Buyers tour homes, run numbers, and pause. This isn't fear, it's calculation. Baton Rouge still functions, but the gap between asking prices and buyer comfort has widened. The warning label is insurance and tax pressure. Until ownership costs feel predictable again, buyers won't rush. What unites these 3 cities isn't collapse, it's expectation. Sellers expect price cuts, buyers expect more. No one is surprised anymore, and that's the danger. Markets don't recover while expectations are misaligned. They drift. You can feel it in the pace of showings, the length of negotiations, the silence between offers. Social proof matters here. Buyers see other buyers waiting, and that reinforces patience. The fear isn't missing out anymore. It's buying too early. This is the phase where discipline matters most. Buyers with strong positions don't force decisions. They let the market prove itself. Sellers who adapt early shorten the pain. Sellers who don't linger longer than planned. None of this means these cities are broken. It means timing is wrong, and timing drives behavior more than headlines. Before the final cities hit the bell. What's next is different, and the signals become impossible to ignore. By the time we reach the final 3, the feeling changes. This isn't hesitation anymore. This is absence. You can sense it the moment you arrive. Streets feel underused, not because it's a slow week, but because there's no one left to replace the people who chose not to buy. At number 3 is Lake Charles. Once positioned as a comeback city after storms and rebuilding cycles, Lake Charles now feels paused in a deeper way. Homes sit for months without serious showings. Price cuts no longer generate urgency. They confirm doubt. Rentals remain vacant even with reduced rates, and incentives barely register. Buyers aren't negotiating here because they're not emotionally engaged. The guidance is firm. Until insurance availability stabilizes and long-term population confidence returns, this market stays in avoidance territory. At number 2 is Monroe. This is where emptiness becomes structural. Monroe once relied on affordability to anchor demand, but affordability alone isn't enough when jobs, growth, and future visibility weaken. Listings expire quietly and relist with smaller numbers that still don't attract attention. Investors who entered for cash flow have stepped back after extended vacancies and rising maintenance costs. Renters aren't converting to buyers. They're leaving. The city doesn't feel broken. it feels bypassed. That distinction matters. Price cuts fail here because buyers don't believe time is on their side. The guidance is clear. Buyers should not enter until employment signals reverse and inventory meaningfully clears. Waiting is not passive here, it's protective. And then there's number one, New Orleans. This is the city that shocks people. Not because New Orleans lost its culture, history, or emotional pull, but because demand math finally overwhelmed belief. Homes sit despite dramatic price reductions. Short-term rentals struggle to stay booked. Long-term rentals carry gaps owners didn't plan for. Insurance costs dominate conversations before kitchens or neighborhoods ever do. Buyers tour, admire, and leave without offers. Incentives don't move them. What you feel here is gravity. The weight of uncertainty keeps demand pinned down. Sellers are still in denial, anchored to what this city meant, instead of what ownership costs now require. Until insurance predictability, tax clarity, and livability costs realign, this market remains one buyer should avoid, no matter how tempting prices look. What unites these three cities is not decline alone, it's finality of behavior. Buyers are no longer waiting for the right deal. They're choosing not to engage at all. That's the signal most people miss. Markets don't announce this phase. They drift into it quietly. Homes don't disappear. They linger. Rentals don't fail loudly. They sit empty. This is where irreversible mistakes happen. Buying here too early doesn't feel wrong at first. It feels patient. Then time passes, liquidity disappears, exit options narrow. Authority matters in moments like this, and the guidance is simple. Avoid these markets until fundamentals change, not headlines. No amount of charm offsets structural risk. You'll want the follow-up to this. Stay subscribed. Now zoom out for a moment, because once you step back, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. These 10 Louisiana cities didn't fail for 10 different reasons. They arrived at the same outcome through slightly different doors. Insurance pressure rose first, quietly turning ownership into a monthly gamble instead of a fixed plan. Then in-migration slowed. New households didn't replace the ones leaving. Builders kept delivering inventory based on yesterday's demand, while investors leaned on rentals that assumed full occupancy forever. When even a small piece of that equation broke, the system stopped working. What looks like separate local problems is really shared math. Insurance premiums surged faster than wages. Taxes and maintenance stacked on top. Rental demand softened at the exact moment investor supply peaked. Suddenly, empty homes weren't an anomaly. They were a signal, not of panic, but of choice. Buyers looked at the numbers and decided waiting was smarter than participating. That's how quiet collapses form. No headlines, no crowds, just absence. Across coastal cities, risk pricing outpaced emotional attachment. In industrial legacy cities, job growth couldn't carry housing expectations alone. In investor-heavy markets, vacancy exposed how fragile yield really was. And in spillover suburbs, momentum vanished once commuters stopped believing the trade-off was worth it. Different stories, same ending. Homes waiting without urgency. Sellers anchored to memory. Buyers anchored to math. Here's the part you can carry with you anywhere. Ask 4 questions before trusting any market. Are insurance costs predictable enough to plan ownership long-term? Is population growth real or just assumed? Does rental demand exist without incentives? And most importantly, if prices fall again, will buyers rush in or continue to wait? When 3 or more answers feel uncertain, emptiness follows. This isn't about fear, it's about clarity. Markets don't collapse loudly anymore. They go quiet. First, and quiet is where expensive mistakes are made if you mistake silence for stability. Understanding this pattern doesn't make you pessimistic, it makes you prepared. This framework alone can save you thousands, sometimes much more. Stay subscribed. Calm insight beats noise every time in markets today. So what do you actually do with all of this? You don't panic and you don't rush. You shift roles. In 2025, the strongest position isn't buyer or seller, it's observer with options. For first-time buyers, patience isn't delay, it's leverage. Empty homes mean sellers are the ones waiting now. Watch for real confirmation signals, multiple price cuts, meaningful concessions, inspections being negotiated instead of waived. When sellers start paying closing costs without being asked, that's your green light, not a TikTok headline. If you're a move-up buyer, timing and liquidity matter more than the house itself. Selling and buying in the same uncertain market is dangerous unless you control the sequence. The safest path is flexibility. Rent longer than planned if needed. Keep cash accessible. The goal isn't upgrading square footage, it's upgrading balance sheets. When markets pause, optionality beats urgency every time. For investors, this cycle is a reality check. Vacancy is no longer a rounding error, it's the risk. Underwrite deals assuming slower leasing, higher insurance, and zero appreciation. If the numbers don't work under stress, they don't work at all. Exit liquidity matters now. Ask yourself who the next buyer would be if you needed out. If that answer feels vague, walk away. Here's the reframe most people miss. Waiting isn't weakness. Waiting is strategy. The people who lose money are usually the ones trying to feel productive while conditions are unclear. Calm, informed inaction is still a decision, and often the smartest one. If this analysis helped you see Louisiana differently, the next video goes further. We'll look at southern cities buyers are quietly avoiding next, and why the warning signs look familiar before headlines ever catch up. Subscribe, comment your city below, and let's analyze it together. This channel isn't about predictions, it's about preparation. Share this with someone making a decision right now. Markets reward clarity, not confidence. The goal is not to time bottoms perfectly, but to avoid being early and wrong. That alone changes outcomes, especially in uncertain cycles like this, where patience quietly outperforms urgency every single time long-term.